accepts that there's nothing permanent except change. And even with that, it's still hard. Generally speaking, I myself am not someone who likes to move a lot, likes to change my daily routine. Granted, of course, you get bored of the mundane and you want something new in life. And there are times when you don't necessarily change for the better, sometimes changes for the worse. But we're in a situation now in TNT where it seems as though we're going in the opposite direction from where we want to go. And yet, not enough of us are willing to change. Too many of us either think it's too hard, and too many of the rest are too complacent, are too happy with the status quo, and are afraid of what might happen to them, what they would lose out if there's any change. And that sentiment, I think, is very discouraging to anyone looking to potentially be an instrument or an agent of change. Generally speaking, even in the workplace, even in private enterprise, not just the public sector we're talking about, not just government, there's resistances to change. Many a small business owner who built his business from scratch can't seem to understand, hey, this might have worked 10 years ago, but the market changed, the industry changed, the economy changed, a whole host of things could have changed. Consumer preferences could have changed. And if you don't adjust to different circumstances, your business will flounder. Well, what about a nation? We assume a nation is too big to fail, except there are examples of nations failing. The degree by which they fail is variable, but the result is a standard of living lower than what we are accustomed to. So then I have to ask, when will we feel enough of an incentive to get over ourselves and seek the change that we apparently want with all of our complaints, but yet we expect the people we complain about to be the instruments of change, to be the driving force behind change, to be the determinants of change? And I say this because one of my issues with our political landscape is the fact that, and you see this in North America as well, and maybe to some extent the United Kingdom, the two main incumbent parties, the general population seems to be hesitant to go beyond them, despite the fact that at the end of the day, the current executive of the UNC has lost 2 general elections. And that's the alternative to a government, a current PNM administration, which arguably should be relatively unpopular. And the internals mechanisms of each party is more than content to throw at us the same candidates who, generally speaking, I would argue, moderates will complain about, not just the supporters of the opposing side. But yet somehow we are so, at least there's too many of us, that's so caught up in, well, I want it to be we time again, so my party needs to get into power. And I do wonder if all of this disincentivize any third party, because what I don't understand, when, in my opinion, the PNM and the UNC have never been weaker as a collective pair. They were weak in the last election, in my opinion. And they look even worse as a pair in this election. And yet, all of the other parties in the political landscape are moving about as quickly as a snail stuck behind a line of salt with a rope tied to its shell, trying to move over quick drying cement. Of course, people associated with the network, including the good lady herself, are members of one of these parties called Hope. They have recently, and I haven't spoken about this yet, so I wanted to get this in. I didn't want this to pass. They were seeking an alliance, a coalition arrangement with other parties, NGOs, unions. And while to some extent they are slightly better off in terms of personnel and having an entity that is more than just one person saying they're forming a party, I still think they're all moving too slow. Where is their slate? What is their ideology? What makes them different besides having a different name, besides having a different slogan? When I say different, I don't just mean we promise to be different. These are ideals. No. What are our ideas? Who is championing these ideas? Do we have 41 people to contest all 41 seats? Are we going to contest? Are we going to be getting people at the last minute? Part of the campaigning that these parties should have been doing is to build up their brand recognition within the population of TNT. And in doing so, the other part is to build up its brand recognition amongst the professionals, the capable people of TNT, to try to encourage them to come forth and serve. It is an unfortunate phenomenon when the best and brightest of us are not in Parliament. What we have in Parliament, for the most part, but not necessarily speaking about all parliamentarians, but for the most part, there are far too many smart men and smart women. They're not the best, they're not the brightest, but they like to take shortcuts and exploit systems. And thus, there's no incentive for them to fix things, because when you fix the loopholes, there's nothing to exploit. Who wants that? Michaela Pandey has her party. Who is running with her? No idea. Guy Griffith has a party. Who is running with him? No idea. Philip Alexander is trading between retiring and coming back. And he has potentially alienated part of his party's political leadership, or previous. And Hope, at the end of the day, what is their plans for the future? And this is why I will always go back to the COP, which technically did, whatever exists of that party, did sign an agreement with Hope. It was an opportunity squandered. And I'm not entirely sure who to blame, but whoever was in charge of that party squandered what could have been our best opportunity to build something more sustainable politically for the future. And that and all tells you how weak our political landscape and democracy is. They now started to win seats, and already the ambitions of individuals were so great that it sank an entire political party. And why I lament that all of these third forces, quote unquote, are moving too slow, because what hope is there that we will have any viable third option in the next general election? Which is why I cannot fault people like one of my callers who says he's going to spoil his ballot as something proactive. He's not going to not go out. He's not going to just stay home to not be counted. He wants to be counted, but that's the best thing he could come up with, because there's nothing out there for him to rally behind. And we are left in the state that we're in. Because you all know what the problems are. All I've got is the latest editions of the usual suspects of issues that plague the country. Sean Michael Small here. It's hard to say good morning. As the ASP pointed out yesterday, it's hard to say good morning these days, because whenever we have a major tragedy, one of the things that bothers me personally is how do I go about my everyday life and try to not let it affect me, try to enjoy the things that I enjoy, try to be positive in the things that needs to be done, continue to be however constructive or lack thereof I am, but not to drop. You know, it's hard. But talking point at the end of the day is here to have the discussion, whether we like it or not. It's one of those things, I guess, that perhaps we should be asking about our politicians. Is it that you don't do things because you don't want to, because you don't like it? Your job is not to pick and choose your battles based on what your preferences are, on your personal interests or likes, or what you think is easiest for you, but it's what's best for the country. We get that lip service, but we don't see the results. Here are some more results with today's Daily Review. And I want to start off, yes, it's going to be crime. People are dying, but now we're not just necessarily seeing the consequences of dead bodies. We're also hearing from various business chambers. One of our daily newspapers has a report, TNT Guardian, I'll say it. I want to highlight this article. I want people to go out and read this article. You can get it online. Multiple business chambers have given their opinion. And it's not that pretty. They are looking at all of the promises being made. And they are making note, it's not just me. These are the same promises that were made before, last year, last month, 2 years ago. This commissioner, the commissioner before, maybe even the commissioner before that, although he will debate that. And his supporters might also debate that, to be fair. Apparently now between Thursday and yesterday, it's 19 in about 4 days, still almost a 5 murder a day average. The Chamber of Industry and Commerce, their president, is saying point blank, existing crime fighting measures are not yielding the success. They're very skeptical about what's being put in place. And they're saying their members are disgruntled. Their members want to reinvest, but are apprehensive about it because at the end of the day, they don't feel safe. Now, I'll hazard a guess that our economy is also not necessarily doing a good job incentivizing local businessmen to reinvest their profits as new capital into new endeavors in TNT. But they're going to say crime. They're going to point out crime. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that. Doma points out, and this is Port of Spain, so of course, to some extent, they're right there next to some of the hotspots. The brazenness of criminals continues to point to a lack of fear for the authorities and that it was time for immediate action. No one is apprehended. This is the gruesome truth. All the press conferences in the world not going to make any more difference, any more of a difference, unless we start seeing some fear among criminals. Greater San Fernando Area Chamber It's lamented the fact that crime has infiltrated South Trinidad. And we're also seeing that, of course, in Tobago. So at some point, it was the East-West corridor. It was gangsters killing gangsters. It was, you know, certain hotspots. East Port of Spain, Mova Laventil, Enterprise, what have you. I mean, not too long ago, I was speaking to a friend of mine from Princestown and his wife, and they felt relatively safe in South when compared to what I knew was going on in parts of the country. But San Fernando Chamber saying, whoa, not anymore. More has to be done in terms of protecting the investments of businesses and entrepreneurs and executives who go about their daily business. We need to get it addressed in the shortest possible time to ensure there is no more fallout. Arima Business Association, same thing, calling out the FUL situation. It needs to stop. Calling out the administration for its fixation, their words, on the FUL issue. Less than 1%, this is what they said, less than 1% of gun-related incidents are caused by FUL holders. Therefore, more than 99% of these gun-related incidents involve illegal firearms. The focus should be on illegal firearms, not FUL holders. I'm not entirely sure how accurate the statistic is, but the general idea of what they're saying, I believe to be true based on everything we know. We have intelligence that suggests that 30 private firearms are used in the commission of crimes. You got that from the states. That sounds like an estimate. An estimate is not a fact. There are tens of thousands of illegal firearms, and there's a fear. This is based on the government. This is based, I believe, in part on the SSA, and there's fear that that estimate, tens of thousands, is a low one. Eastern Business and Merchants Association, billions of dollars spent in the last 10 years. We have made no progress. In the private sector, people would be fired for such blatant non-performance and wastage of funds with no tangible results. I'm sorry. That's why I never ascribed to the whole give Erla a chance. She sounded incapable from the jump, and it only got worse. Because this is not, we're not selling teddy bears. National security is not selling essential oils and scented candles and marshmallows and chocolate, things we could do without if they fail. I've always come back to the fact that people are dying. And while it's difficult to know exactly how much we will attribute it to non-performance, we cannot reasonably sit down on our laurels and say, well, you know, even though there's a 10% detection rate and criminals seem to be as brazen as ever, it's not the fault of senior leadership of national security and their methods and the execution and implementation of their plans and the resources or lack thereof, etc., etc. No, everybody's doing their job reasonably well. We're just unlucky. Does that make sense? A reduction in murders, unfortunately, is purely a results-based business. Shavana's Chamber, the recent response of the commissioner, not alleviated the concerns of our business community, a sense of disillusionment with the Ministry of National Security. Businessmen have lost faith in the current measures being taken. There's an election year coming. There's an election year coming, and you have multiple business chambers basically saying, and the government might want to push back against this, but then what are they going to say in its defense? No, it's not the crime, it's our bad economic management that's causing local capital flight. And this whole idea, and kudos to, I think it was Mr. San Fernando, because he called me out on it. Now, I did say that at least in Tobago, you could have an increased police presence and that might have some effect. But I was called out for it because I did say it, but maybe I didn't give it the weight that it deserved. Nothing with regards to Tobago is going to be revolutionary. Nothing is going to be anything new. And if it's not working in Trinidad, particularly in the long run, why do we think that it's going to work in Tobago? It works in Carnival as a band-aid, but it also helps that Carnival distracts the criminal element. Who wants to be killing people when they want to go to a fete? But when you don't have that, this is what we get. Now, still on this story, MP Dinesh Rambali, he is criticizing both the government and the opposition for engaging in petty politics and doing nothing to address the population's concern about crime. Now, one could argue he's an MP, he is technically part of the problem. However, to be fair to him, he is one of the dissidents. He has already called out the establishment of his own party. And to some extent, his political ambitions notwithstanding, the content of what he's saying, I can't disagree with it. I don't know what his motives are for saying it, but I can't disagree with it because I have said the same thing. And maybe he was part of a power play, or maybe he was acting in good faith. I wanted to see what was best for the country. But regardless, I think at the end of the day, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. People will criticize me. Why are you criticizing the opposition for? It takes two to tango in Parliament. It takes two to get a 3/5 majority when the actual majority of government is so small. If it's not that I needed to see legislation passed and not criticize the opposition, I just needed to see them do more to try to compromise with the government to get bipartisan efforts off the ground. But both sides compromise about as much as each other, which is not a lot, except the opposition did help the government pass some bills, so I'll give them that. I'm not entirely sure that the government did anything to earn that cooperation, so I'll give that to the opposition. But at the end of the day, look at where we are. And if you think this is time to play, well, which of the two parties who have been in power for the last 15 years are going to somehow magically be the solution, let's not forget, we had a threat to national security causing a whole state of emergency under the partnership. Why? And that and all is smoke and mirrors to the same level as some people criticize the current government for. Because nothing has come out of that except wrongful prosecution, wrongful arrests, malicious prosecution cases, and hundreds of thousands of dollars going out the treasury because we don't know how to handle our own business properly. But I'll want to end this here with one Pastor Dutton. He said it's hard to fight crime in lawless, corrupt TNT. And that's what, to some extent, what the professor was saying yesterday and has been saying for quite some time. We don't enforce our laws. So why our own society does not respect the authority of law and the regulations by which we should be operating under. Our own public service, to some extent, does not even respect the regulations by which it should be operating under. Are we surprised that these breakdowns have then further widened the cracks of lawlessness in society? And now when murder is out of control, we're like, well, how did we get here? We only approved of mid-level corruption, not murder. Well, you give someone an inch, they take a mile. You give a society an inch, it'll take a Grand Canyon. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, there'll be some more stories to get into, and then I want to touch this OCM thing. I don't like it. And I feel as though once more politicians seem to not understand what transparency is and why they're making themselves look bad. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Stories that I want to get into. Listen, I have just gone on 25 minutes about crime and the fact that we seemingly do not want to get out of our own way. Now, here's an example where I guess you could say corruption then leads to violent crime. Because some people, that's why I ended it off before the break. Some people might not necessarily think there's a direct connection. Oh no, in some cases there is a very direct connection. Well, at least according to one report coming out of yesterday's papers, there is apparently an overtime racket at the Tacarigua Regional Complex for WASA. And this overtime racket, well, it's not necessarily just overtime. There's shift manipulation with regards to favoritism and unfair practices. There is incidents of thefts, equipment abuse and sabotage. And then there's threats and intimidation. Now, essentially what's going on is, allegedly, a group of employees are manipulating the overtime system to get extra money. So instead of somebody coming off of their shift, one of their colleagues will cover their shift with overtime, and they will essentially pad their numbers per se, as well as wanting to include people into this scheme or affect other people's waking hours and limit their waking hours, right? Now, ironically, the money we're talking about is not necessarily that big, relatively speaking, to the national budget. It's only estimated to be $500,000 a year. But it includes being paid for unwake shifts, not just overtime manipulation, signing in, not performing their duties. Now, apparently, this sort of thing may be happening at multiple WASA installations across the country. And that WASA executives know about the situation, but at the end of the day, nothing's being done about it. And it reached the point where not only is it being swept under the rug by certain elements of management, which, if true, gives credence to the exercise of WASA to purge management, It also gives a potential explanation why the union wanted to interfere, or at least the members of the union wanted the union to speak out against WASA changing management. Whistleblowers apparently have been receiving threats. You know, people wanting to do the right thing. We have a whole whistleblower legislation that's coming down the pipe. Apparently their names have not necessarily been kept secret, their issues have not been dealt with, and to some extent, it's also alleged that even one judge was, I don't even necessarily want to use the phrase that's been reported, but essentially it was a death threat referencing one murdered state prosecutor as an allegory or an analogy. Why call a crime leading to violent crime? The need to clean up WASA and other state agencies is apparent. But I have said this before seeing this story. There are, I believe, I strongly believe, different aspects of the public service where individuals have their little fief. And they use their little fief for power and influence and money. And they get their ill-begotten gains, whether it is through kickbacks, whether it is through manipulating overtime system or wages, whether it is manipulating contracts. And it's going to be difficult to uproot all of this. And I do wonder if our politicians are too weak because they themselves don't have an incentive to do all this hard work, because the people not involved, the rest of us seemingly don't care because we'll vote for whoever we'll vote for anyway. Meanwhile, why piss off when potentially a significant amount of the individuals involved in these schemes at whatever level it is, at whatever location it may be, they are technically voters in the union. If we piss them off, we might piss off their whole union. We can't have that. We need to win the election first, then we will clean things. We can't do any good if we're not in power, except when we get in power, we're too afraid to do any good because we don't have enough support of the rest of the population to tell the people who are corrupt, hey, we don't need you, you know. We could clean you up. We don't have that. So whose fault is it? Is it the politicians being too weak, or is it the voters being too apathetic? This is the result. To some extent, I think it's both. If we had strong politicians and strong leaders, they would take us to the promised land. They would show us the way. But we don't have that. They don't show us the way. They placate us. All right, let's move on. Try to do some more stories, some quick hits. First, Prime Minister, he is apparently saying he intends to initiate legal action against the political leader of the NTA based on statements that Gary Griffith has said about receiving money to prosecute political opponents. And to some extent, Gary Griffith has been talking about the government. Well, he's not necessarily directly made claims. He's said things at times about how, you know, he will not go after people for political means or something to that effect. And what's funny is Gary is not backing down. He's basically saying, all right, yeah, let's go to court. Now, I don't know to what extent this could be a bluff, this could be bluster, or if he's serious. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he will win in court. He thinks he will win. But here's the problem. The Prime Minister has already said that after the local government elections last year, he will be able to speak more, reveal more, say more about the whole Gary Griffith FUL Stanley John, merit list, blah, blah, blah situation. And I asked him that on the night of the local government elections, and apparently the Minister of Everything, Stuart Young, he had a chuckle because, you know, I mean, this was literally as it was over. I didn't wait. I asked him about it. And basically, the boisterous, righteous indignation on the campaign trail that the Prime Minister had died a very quick death when he basically said, well, it's before the court and I can't speak about it. All of those implied allegations. It's why with the SSA, what did we say? I mean, as much as I wanted to believe the Prime Minister, I'm still waiting on what happens in court. Who's going to get charged? I did not say that. So even when I'm willing to take him at his word, I still need to follow up. But with regards to the first time with Gary, with the whole FUL situation, what's come out of that? Anything? You need, why is it that if you're right, you need Parliament protection? Why you can't just say it publicly? When they have big high-profile cases like this in other countries, they don't need parliamentary protection. They don't hide behind office. They have public press conferences where they and we've said this before, they put out the investigative officer, the head of the investigation, the head of the service, the head of the division, whoever else was in charge of the various support services to gather the supporting evidence. And then the politicians, more than one will come out. They'll want their photo opportunity. If they have evidence and they know they have evidence, they'll say it publicly, openly. We don't have that. And now the Prime Minister saying, oh, well, I'll take it to court. All right, I'll believe it when I see it. I don't care about your intention to initiate legal action. I care if you have anything substantial enough to initiate legal action. Because you've already utilized the court of public opinion and implied claims, and it's not like the Prime Minister is the only one. That's basically the political song and dance in the current environment. So let's not get it twisted and single him out. But this is the story at the forefront in the news right now, and I'm pointing to the fact that what you say is meaningless if nothing substantial comes out of it. I'm still waiting since the local government election, which is almost a year ago. I ain't heard nothing yet. If the court's too slow, use the government. Fix the courts. Moving on. There's another situation of malicious prosecution. And I won't go into all the details, but to be short, the state didn't even try to give a defense. Apparently, there was camera footage to show the arrest, which basically discredited at least some of what the arresting officers claimed. And essentially, an individual is entitled to damages. This is the ruling. Damages have not been assessed yet, but Justice Frank Superstad has ruled that Nicholas Owen is entitled to damages for assault and battery, wrongful arrest, false imprisonment, and malicious prosecution. He was taken to the hospital. And then his ordeal continued after that. I don't think they charged him with anything. And it goes to the point where he himself, and this could just be his speculation and panic, but he himself wonders if this was all part of a scheme by his neighbor, who apparently was one of the officers, I believe. Or somebody involved. Yes, his former neighbor. Anyway, that it was a scheme well, he believes it was a scheme to kill him. Regardless, this is not a good look for the TTPS. I'll just say this, Ayla. I would believe you a little bit more if we did not have all of this bad perception. And to be fair, this did not happen under her watch, but I'm not really, this happened in 2017, but I'm not really seeing the service coming out of this. So we're actually gonna depend on them to deal with criminals when too many officers are doing this nonsense. Let's move on to the next story. I wanna get this one done. and this is where we'll end today with the daily review. I say this every time it comes up. The police keep talking about things like Facebook Marketplace and being victims of fraud and trying to protect yourself. Well, I did not expect to read what I expected this morning. It's one thing for the population to not receive the message of the TTPS or to even potentially ignore said message and do the things that the police are advising us not to do. It's another thing entirely when a WPC who is attached to the TTPS's Information Technology Department is a victim of fraud due to a transaction that was set up on a social media platform. She was selling an iPhone. She gave the potential customer the phone. She got a sealed brown envelope. Then the suspect fled. Then, apparently, they opened the envelope and it was small bills, padding the envelope to make it look like it was a lot of money. If the police can't protect themselves, they're supposed to protect us? Think about that. Let's take a break on Talking Points. We'll be right back after this.
Coming soon to WESN.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond
want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services, yeah.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren. Coming soon to WESN.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not
game.
no.
Let's go to the last part.
There's a situation which, in the current environment, with the current precedents that have been set, with the past behavior of our politicians, it's a situation which I don't think I could take lightly. It's one that I cannot give the benefit of the doubt, no matter how insignificant and benign it might actually be, because I don't think we could take the risk. Now, media is a very complex institution of society, a complex pillar. I mean, government is technically a complex pillar. Judiciary is a complex pillar, but media is a difficult conundrum, particularly in these modern times. And there are concerns about certain aspects of private media and the profit incentive versus the duty of care that it has for its society, that it services, that it provides new services for. But then there's the other aspects of it. So before I get into what's going on with regards to OCM and why I think this is potentially another disaster in the making, no matter how small it might be, I have something that I want you all to see to just kind of give a baseline. It's time to cue this.
Who do we need to get into the room to actually talk about how do we resist authoritarian control over the media? Who are the people who need to be having those conversations, who can come up with the solutions for how to make sure that we protect free media and protect free expression?
Every media needs an audience. What we need today is an audience which is active. And active means an audience that feeds back and which helps propagate the content. In the world of social media, this is what we need.
A lot of people subscribe to national newspapers already, but I think that they can also look at county level, city level, local media and subscribe to those local organizations.
I think authoritarians tend to identify the media with the spreading government propaganda and basically lies. And then what we should do is defend the autonomy of the media in terms of a description of things according to evidence.
We can set up independent media that is not funded by business interests and will not be subject to pressure by the state to not report on certain things that are going to hurt their business interests.
I think this is an existential moment, not just for journalism, but for democracy. If nothing substantial is done, democracy as we know it is dead. The world as we know it has fundamentally been destroyed. We're on quicksand. Now, the question is, what are you going to do? How are we going to rebuild this new world? The information ecosystem has actually allowed lies laced with anger and hate to spread faster than facts. Without facts, you have no truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. That's the foundation of a democracy.
The idea of objectivity. There was a lot going on in the beginning of the 20th century. There was a real sense that newspapers were terrible, and they were. This was the era of the yellow press with Hearst and Pulitzer, who were writing about the Spanish-American War and doing it in ways that were extremely inflammatory and completely made up. There was an argument at the time, I've written about this, an argument in the 1880s and 90s in which many journalists were saying, I love to fake. It's fun. Readers like it when I fake. And what they meant was embellishment, making up some quotes, doing a little bit of tweaking, nothing like the nefarious wholesale invention that it has since become. But there was a sense in the late 19th century that journalism wasn't serving democracy. And it went along, the reform movement was caught up in all sorts of things, the progressive era reformers, a growing interest in science and objectivity, in reason, the kind of a desperation that something needed to change. It was a slow process, and one of the main drivers of that process was the New York Times, when Adolf Oakes bought the New York Times, and he wanted to make it respectable. And by being respectable, that sort of meant you had to be a little bit more scientific and a little bit more objective. But mainly, he wanted to be decent.
Yeah.
Parent company of one of our local TV stations, one of our local newspapers, one of our local radio stations. Our among other things, government's National Investment Fund put forward 2 members to be on their board, or two individuals to be up for consideration. And the shareholders basically voted them down. Now, the government is saying at the end of the day, they have a significant share in OCM, and they have gone so far as to ask for the names of the voters. More on that little piece of blatant hypocrisy in a bit. But the first thing I want to point out is, because the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Brian Manning, he tried to defend the situation, saying it's not an attempt to interfere with the freedom of the press, but part of its fiscal responsibility as it was one of the company's largest shareholders. All right, cool. Why is the government seeking to continue being a shareholder in a company that is a holding company for other media houses, or for more than one media house? Especially when the government also technically is an owner of its own media house. A media house which, true to form, despite all of the resources pumped into it, its broadcasts still look like they're from the 1980s in 2024. Which is to just show you how much bang for your buck you could get with government leadership. But also, one of the most interesting things I saw, and I wasn't looking out for this, but it's something that now comes to mind. I'm looking at one of their shows that goes in depth into topics, and I'm looking at the subject matter, and I'm like, this is not what we need right now. We don't need a special interest story in a show that I assume is supposed to be modeled after something like Hard Talk on the BBC. And when I say special interest, I don't mean an actual political, economic special interest. I'm talking about a human interest story. That's not what that's for. But I guess, you know, when you state media, there's certain things you can't touch. And then I'm trying to see now, one of the people that they put forward was a former insurance executive. Not sure why he was recommended to the board of a holding company for a media house, but the other was recently on the board of state-owned TTT. Yeah, there's nothing to see there. No one would think that maybe there's some sort of link politically. No one. No one would have that thought. But what makes this the height of hypocrisy for me, despite the fact that, yes, okay, so now the government is in, they own two, well, technically they have ownership in multiple media entities. They don't necessarily see how that could be perceived as undermining press independence. Let's take a step back. What did I say about one state media house and their broadcasts straight from the 1980s? Quality isn't there, right? Government also has its hand in tourism. They own Hilton and Hyatt. But somehow tourism, with all of their plans, they own Magdalena, and then each time the new plan for tourism is to have another hotel and another hotel. You know, they're like DJ Khaled, just without the hits. Another one. But does tourism improve? No. And now it's an airport. And again, I would love to see if they will only be taking international flights once a week. So we might have at best one flight a day. Might not even have flights coming in every day for a whole new airport. Someone tell me how that's supposed to work, because the domestic is back at the old terminal. But government doesn't know how to do tourism, but they're in the business of tourism. But they fail at tourism. They're in the business of media, but they essentially fail at media. But then what makes it the most hypocritical thing to me, and maybe I'm misusing the word, OCM is, despite the fact that that state owns 20-something% of the shares, I could be wrong about that. Yes, 23% stake. It's a private company. And yet the government sent a lawyer on behalf of the NIF to basically say, who are the shareholders? We want that information because, you know, public interest. We have a right to know somehow private information of the owners of a private entity. And yet, let's not forget that the AG apparently needed to get permission from his bosses, the senior counsels and lawyers that get state briefs, because apparently he works for them because he needed their permission to reveal their names. Public business, direct public business, not public ownership of a public stake in a private entity. The direct public business, we do not have the right to know, but the state has the right to know because they don't have 51% of a private entity. Does that make sense? By their own logic, if we don't have a right to know about the names of lawyers, why does the state have right to know about the names of the shareholders and who voted for what? Why do they need to know which shareholder voted yes or no? What would be the motivation behind that? To lobby them? To intimidate them? To persecute them? Someone please show me the justification about state interference into the private operations of a holding company of multiple media houses. And tell me if the minister in the Ministry of Finance knows what he's talking about. Because based on his colleagues' logic, you all have a right to know. Why should you all have a right to know? You all need permission to know first, because the owners of a media house could be put in danger if we're not careful, right? So why do you have the right to know? You don't. Or at least based on your logic, you don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone could correct me, but we'll take a break. This story, there might be more to it, but I'll leave it there. Let's take a break. When we come back, we open the phone line. Stay tuned.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street Woodbrook. Metropolitan Bookshop Ariapita Avenue Woodbrook and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People. The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, And through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Welcome back to Talk About, ladies and gentlemen. Now is the time. We'll open up the phone lines. I want to hear from you, the viewer. Of course, I had a lot to say today. A lot to say. Borderline getting upset. And I guess today is my turn. The ASP, some people might have said, hey, you're kind of looking off today. Well, today I am getting off because I'll say it again. Why does the state have ownership in media? I don't know what the point of the state media TV station is. I don't know what benefit it provides society. I don't think it really provides a benefit anymore. When it was initially created, it was the only TV station at one point, but not anymore, right? But more importantly, you have shares in OCM. Why? Why don't you divest that as soon as possible? Because, I mean, there's a conflict of interest already because one of the companies under OCM directly competes with your own TV station. That's not a conflict of interest. You're the state. Their job is to hold you to account. How could the media be the fourth estate if government, has 23%? But of course, they don't see it that way. There's nothing wrong here because we're the good boys and the good boys do nothing wrong, right? We just go to Miami and forget whether we're senior counsel or not. We just interfere with the process to select a commissioner of police. We just don't actually follow the law when it comes to laying the audit report in Parliament. We just don't let the people know what actually we're doing with the money from the HSF or why the mandated by law time frame to put extra revenue not budgeted for or not expected into the HSF, why we're late to do that. Because we're the good boys. Or in I believe, to paraphrase the Minister of Finance, we are perceived as less corrupt. Sorry, we have two callers on the line. Diego Martin, you're on the air.
Hello.
Morning. Caller, you on the air? Caller?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, you're on the air, caller. Go ahead.
Hello.
Caller? I think the caller is breaking up. All right, we'll take Faizabad while we wait and Diego Martin. Maybe you need to call back. Something might be wrong with your connection. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. I want to remind ourselves that we live in a democracy. And the democracy is that people voted out the UNC and voted in the PNM on the premise that they are going to do a better job. They went through one term, regardless of the failures that they would have had in the first term. We still place the confidence in them that they could go forward and fix the thing. They abysmally fail in their efforts. Incompetence is the order of the day. There is no secret about that. But, and with respect to the third party, I want to remind you that Mr. Dukaran was the leader of the COP. And for some reason, he is not there anymore. Or I don't know if he would have abandoned them or what is the thing. So clearly, the third force who would have made an impact and who didn't make an impact failed to stand up to the test of time. So a lot of people must remember that. The other point I want to touch on is that you spoke about WASA and government being afraid to touch WASA for political reasons. But Sean, I don't think so, I think they're playing, look how they went in and shut down Petrotrin and won. Can you remember how they shut down Petrotrin? That happened within a matter of weeks. You see? So if they really want to deal with the problem, they will issue. However, the Prime Minister and his cabinet would have, and in Parliament would have used parliamentary privileges to water down a lot of bills, the procurement bill, the the simple majority passing what they want. The first past the post system doesn't have anything. But what I want to see and what is interesting, I'm wondering if the criminals are now telling the government, hey, we don't care about all you, they can't do nothing, or they're incompetent. Because look at the amount of murder just after they passed all this bail bill and everything with the support of the opposition. It's a clear message they are sending to this government that you are very incompetent and we don't care about you. Have a nice day, my brother.
Thank you, caller. Do we have Digger Martin back? Well, as we wait, I'll respond to so many things that you said. First of all, I think Dukaran was pushed out by people who were ambitious, and their ambitions sunk the COP. That's basically what I think. Whoever was the political leader to come after Dukaran basically had the same used car salesman feel as the rest of the political landscape. Let's put it that way. We have Tunapun on the line. I'll respond more, but we'll take this caller next. Tunapun, good morning. You're on here. Caller, good morning. All right, Diego Martin, good morning. You're on here.
Right, good morning, good morning. I hope we have a better link now. I'm going to do a barrel on you this morning. And what it is, I want to start first with the WASA issue and the alleged corruption. And one of the things the minister said was 15 years ago it started. 15 years ago meant it started under the PNM. 9 and 5 is 14. So for one year will be the latter part of the last manning and registration. So if he confirms that that was part of basically the PNM sort of issue, then we have to address it. But the important thing, I believe the minister deflecting from the real issue at WASA, that £30,000 that is being spent on a external lawsuit. Who is the chairman protecting? That is what we want to know. Who in the hierarchy of WASA is being protected? Is it board members? Is it junior people? Is it executive? We want to know what the lawsuit is all about. With the fella by the name, I believe, is Adelan Johnson. We know everything about him. The second issue is the Prime Minister going after Gary. 5 years after all of those things that Gary has seen, now going after, it is passing strange. I am of the view that the contract with the external investigators, they call them Kate something, I believe that is coming to an end, so they will no longer be there. So he's bringing up that because there are other serious allegations made against him as a teacher on savory business, and he hasn't gone after those radio talk show. And the final point, the WPC, when she went to sell a cell phone, and they run with it, I want to see the leadership of the police taking action against that police officer. That will tell me where they're going, because the police service is one thing and the members doing something else. So where are we to stand? What is he saying? Do as I say and don't do as I do. They're telling us don't do those things, and you have one of your own officers. Luckily, it wasn't a senior one of the police people who is in the executive. Then everything falls down with the TTPS. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Wait. Go back to what your point about Gary. Just clarify it for me. What were you saying? Because I think I missed something.
Right. He's now talking to going after Gary. Gary has been saying that ever since 3 or 4 years. Why is he now saying it now? And what I'm saying, I suspect the contract with the internal investigator that a set of cabinet members was involved and they went abroad to discuss it with those investigators. I believe that contract is coming to an end. When that comes to an end, those people going back to the UK. So there won't be a wrong for the hullabaloo that it will create, because they're going to be subpoenaed anyhow to give evidence why they were here, what they came for, and it is in the public domain. It might be a political witch hunt, and he's trying to shut up Gary, but Gary has deep pockets and Gary has a little more brains and a lot of the former, he's a little more intelligent than a lot of the former commissioner of police, and he have good legal advice. Why all of a sudden you come in for that now? That is not relevant. 18 died
Yeah.
over the weekend and you tell me nothing.
Yeah.
I go on, have a nice morning.
Thanks, caller. You're right. All right. I want to make sure I didn't misunderstand you. Yeah, I'll say this. When Gary is on the ball, he is on the ball. When he was commissioned, I saw him maneuver around some pitfalls that might seem obvious. If I try to explain it, they might seem minor and obvious. But look, Taylor fell into traps of our own making more than once. So it's not that obvious, apparently. So to say that he has enough of an intelligence to say that he's smarter than the average politician, I'll believe that. How much smarter, he might want to debate that. We have Tuna Puna on the line before there's more that I need to say, but Tuna Puna on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on here. Caller, good morning.
Hello. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yes, you're on here. Go ahead.
All right.
Caller, you're on here. Do you have a question or a statement?
Yes. I want to make a statement. I'm dealing with the question of the existence of criminal gangs and guns on the street. And it is based solely on the extraordinary profits derived from the drug market and concomitant sale of guns. The question, therefore, is who can establish such a market? Clearly, it's not the man who's peddling the drugs on the streets or committing robberies in homes or businesses. So until we decide to tackle and neutralize those criminal financiers in our society, we are not going to reach anywhere, and we'll be having this debate year in, year out, and day after day. So I'm suggesting that the powers that be establish some sort of mechanism where they go after these men with deep pockets in activities. That's my contribution.
Thank you, caller. A sentiment that is shared by Carnegie Sheriff. But we do have another caller before I could comment on that. From El Socorro, good morning, caller, you're on here.
Yes, thank you, Sean. Morning. So
Morning.
after this massacre, the Deputy Commissioner of Police mentioned one Mr. Benjamin. I'm reading the news there yesterday. He said all stations are on high alert. So I'm asking the question, is it only after this massacre that your stations will be on high alert? What about all the gun and the massacres in the past 15 days, 20 days, 30 days, 40 days? This is so highly disturbing to me about high alert. And that we would now have what? In the face policing. What in the name of what is blimping in the face police? And then just talking about that massacre down in Konopia. Sean, from what I'm reading in the news there again, and I'm just reporting from the news there about these 3 people gunned down.
Yeah.
One was the target, and 2 were what we call collateral damage. They went after one man, and they don't care what the hell who they shoot after, and 2 other men get killed. And then you talk about all the gunplay with shots ringing all over the place, employees running for their lives. You and I could be sitting in a mall, Sean, eating our breakfast or dinner with friends. Gunplay starts, and in that gunplay, we get shot and killed. This is where we have reached in Trinidad and Tobago, Sean, a state of paralysis. Thank you so much.
Caller, this is the point that I was trying to make, or I make every time. And perhaps how you made it there, I'll follow up with that. Maybe this would be a better way to do it. After the mass shooting, stations go on high alert. Except we were told after the mass shooting previously before that the police service was on high alert. And that's after being told after the mass shooting before that the police service was on high alert. So is it that they get off of high alert? Because based on what they tell us, high alert is not going to stop mass shootings because they keep going on high alert and the mass shootings keep happening. So do they go on higher late and then they stop? Do they have to admit that they cannot sustain it? Or is higher late just a euphemism to say, we'll schedule some more patrols and roadblocks for appearance's sake, and then we'll go back to business as usual in a few days? Because literally, we saw the police presence after the mass shooting in Tobago, which was what, a week or 2.5 before, something like that? Bam! They were even after the one in Tobago, there was an increased police presence on the ground in Trinidad. And did that stop what happened this weekend? No. So at the end of the day, what are they trying to tell us? We have Shogunas on the line. Good morning, caller. On here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Technically, the government don't have shares in OCM. That's a mutual fund that is to be held by people. Anybody could subscribe to that. Oh, you made a relevant point. Government have their own media houses, and what they should be doing with that, they don't. They should be explaining the reasons for all these laws they want to bring and all these decisions. And you know how they hide everything they did with property tax. Right? Up to now we can't know why they do that. What I find is amazing is they wanted to know who voted against them. And they had 3 people there in the meeting who never gave no reason why I should vote for them. The people that put up, they couldn't say what the job was, what is the qualification, nothing. And then government come out afterwards and say they want to know who voted for them. But these people was there, They voted against was by a show of hands. And when they show of hands, they counted how much people for and against, and the only people who voted for the government was the people they put there to represent them. So I don't understand how the government is operating, and this is a clear case of trying to interfere with the freedom of the press. Any questions?
No, caller. I mean, you more or less said it, summed it up there. It's very hard not to think your conclusion is not, even if by some, all right, let's just say it's unintentional. That's the result. It's going to impede on the freedom of the press, regardless of what the government might say, well, we didn't mean to. Doesn't matter. That's going to be the result. We have more on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller?
Hello?
Hi, you're on there.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Yeah, Sean. Sean, don't you think that the longer you do a job, the better you get at it?
Yes, it's supposed to be that way, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Well, Sean, we have a government in office for 50+ years, Sean. Does it look to you or anybody that these people getting better at what they're doing?
Well, it's not the same people. It's not all the same people.
Sean, same policies, Sean. The same thing. What has the PNM done differently within this set of people? What have they been doing differently to what went on in the past? The same thing. And Sean, I told you yesterday, I said, listen, the crime situation seems to be always worse under them. You told me that you don't necessarily agree because they are wrong the longest. And you can't really say it get better when the others were there. I keep telling people it's 50+ years against 17, 1-7. Remember that? 1-7. And if you're saying it didn't get better, did it get worse? And if it didn't get worse, that says something. But nonetheless, we as a nation continue to not realize that we're playing with something that is very dangerous. You see that situation you're speaking about with the OCM board? Tell me why. Why are they pushing? It seems that everything about them, they want to control everything, and they will do whatever it takes from the merit list, from the putting up press. You see, and we speak about things and forget. Why you put someone from the bowels of the party as president, and we only talk about it and then we accept it? We should be rejected. That fight should never have ended. And I'll go back a little bit. Sean, A prime minister meets with all the known criminals, and he ended up calling them community leaders. All of them became millionaires. Sean, anybody, any criminologist, any political scientist ever asked the question? Listen to me carefully. I, as a normal police officer, see my prime minister meet with criminals, make all of them millionaires. How am I supposed to feel when I, as a police officer, my intent was to try and get these people locked up? You know, nobody ever spoke about that. There's evil in this country that we are accepting, you know, and we just keep accepting it and feel that we're doing something. And some of us will just pray. But we're in a real mess. And this administration, Sean, to me, is the worst I have ever seen in this country. We need to be careful. I go on.
One thing, Caller, will disagree with you. I don't know. The circumstances this administration is under is not the same like previous ones, except maybe the NAR. So if we compare to the NAR, I will agree with you. This administration does not look good at all. Because at the end of the day, we could lament about the fact that what Robinson did at that time was unpopular but necessary. Now, to what degree was it necessary? That's a debate, right? But it pulled us out of the situation. Although, to be fair, we were somewhat saved with oil and gas prices rising again. And that doesn't seem to be happening this time. So some of why things are bad is because of external reasons. I will always give the government that. But within the confines of the circumstances that they have to operate within, I think we could all agree the results are not acceptable. There's too much controversy, not about the results on where the money is going and stuff like that, but things like accountability, transparency, reduction in waste, things that, yes, we have an economic situation that is in part due to the energy market, the global energy market. I get that. But things like transparency and accountability, at the end of the day, whether the results are, some results are good or bad, there will be certain aspects we could look at and judge them by, and they come up one thing. And this OCM thing is just an example where they seem to not understand how a public government situation you're supposed to operate as opposed to private. They use the word public interest when it suits them, but I don't think they understand. Hence why learned senior counsel needed to ask permission about revealing information with regards to where public money is being spent. But they could inquire into private investors and shareholders. Somehow they have that right. And at the end of the day, yes, the PNM gets better over time because they're not in the business of governing the country. They generally don't have much of a clue once they win the election. Their institutional knowledge, their organizational structure, what makes them better than UNC is the institutional knowledge of how to win elections. They have one of their best and brightest stuck in their party executive, not really doing anything on a cabinet level, because governance is not their goal. Their goal is to get in power. Most politicians in TNT only look at elections. Vote out the other people, they're bad. What's your plan when you come into power? Pff, what plan? I don't have a plan. I'm just the alternative to them, so you need to vote them out. That's the plan. For tourism, there is no plan. For agriculture, there is no plan. For ease of doing business, there is no plan. For the criminal justice system, there is no plan. To expand local manufacturing, there's no plan. Even oil and gas, one could argue there isn't much of a plan. There's a plan. Is it a good plan? I don't know. The thing is, as bad as they are, they beat the UNC last general election. Because, and this goes back to the first call, I believe. This is a democracy. But when someone is voted out, usually they step down, although Trump came back. So, you know, now we've seen that in another jurisdiction, not just in TNT and countries like TNT. But look at but look, Mitt Romney, he lost his election. He's gone, right? Bush Sr. lost his election. He walked away. Bush Sr. was probably the best president that the United States had, in my opinion, when compared to all of his predecessors, all of them. Look at the UK. They have gone through a merry-go-round of prime ministers who fade into the night when it seems as though their time is up. Now, Manning has lost and come back. Mr. Pandey has lost and come back. So it's not as though Kamala Persad did anything, you know, against the norm, but she lost twice in a row. And that is the alternative that the UNC is putting forward. We've beaten her head to head. We've already won the best of 3. We didn't even drop a game in the conference finals. Now we're going for a 3rd attempt in a row. Even if Kamala wins, I don't think she will have a position of strength, all things considered. It's not as though the results from her last administration was spectacular anyway. She got voted out for a reason. The current government is so weak, perception-wise, looks so bad, and yet, and let's not forget, they're the incumbent for 2 terms. That usually, we alternate, right? We don't keep people in office just so, at least not anymore. A lot of modern democracies are like that. People don't sustain their reigns because as the incumbent, you are just naturally going to become more and more unpopular as time goes on. And yet, you cannot say that the UNC is favored to win next year. You can't. You cannot. There's nothing to indicate that. That makes no sense to me. The fact that that is the state of things makes no sense to me. That means that the whole situation is out of whack. We do not have a healthy democracy, and we are paying the price for it. You're right about that. We are paying the price for our own indecisiveness and our own, dare I say, foolishness. And I'll close with this, because we're talking about crime, and Karen has said this before, and one caller said it again, so I'm going to throw this out there. Criminal financiers, Mr. Biggs, the big shots, the shot callers, the drug lords, the ones in charge, they seemingly are untouchable. I'll tell you this, politicians know who they are. They know. Trust me, they know. We have intelligence. They know. Now, is it like with regards to members in the gangs, we just don't have the ability to gather evidence to go after them? Or is it that not only do criminals not fear law enforcement, but law enforcement and elected officials fear the big shot criminals and will not go after them? They will not. I've said this before, earlier, I think this year or last year, all politicians are weak. This problem needs people who are strong. Show me who is strong, who truly is strong in the political class. Because we've gone past the point where we're talking about strength in who could get bills passed. We're talking about potentially having to make real sacrifice in order to affect the necessary change. Who's willing to do that? Too often, we perceive them to be too busy lining their pockets. That's what government is good for. duty to country. The best of us avoid government and politics for a reason. Think about it. Think about it. That's all the time we have today. We're over time as usual. I want to thank all the callers for engaging with me today. This might be a futile effort, but at the very least, until this next election, I'm going to keep harping on these things because we have to start somewhere. And I'm not going to give up all hope yet, and neither should you. So make today a good day, as my co-host always says. Remember your allegiance to this Twin Island Republic. We will see you tomorrow. The good lady won't be with us, but I do have another guest to speak about another issue. It never ends. But we should still hold our heads up, TNT. Goodbye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
NASA and for Boeing.
Geopolitics still obviously expanding way beyond Earth's frontiers into space. Now, we're talking there about the International Space Station. It is an ageing station, and we've been wondering many years, when will it be decommissioned? And we recently learned that it will be SpaceX.
Exactly. On June 26, NASA announced that it had selected SpaceX to deorbit and destroy the International Space Station. Now, the way they're going to do it, they're going to create a new vehicle that is literally going to tow away the International Space Station, bring it back towards Earth, and crash it onto Point Nemo. Point Nemo is in the middle of the Atlantic. It's the point known to be the furthest away. And this is actually from Earth, and this is what we actually do with deorbited satellites. This is a space grave. This is where we crash everything, all the space debris. Now, it can sound crazy. And when you speak to people from the field, they tell you that they have all this mechanism to really make it sink to the bottom of the ocean, but it's still quite crazy. Even though it's also important to say that whenever it comes into the atmosphere, most of the debris actually blows up into a fireball. Now, of course, the next question is what will replace the ISS? There are two different projects that seem to be holding up. So you have the Starlab project, which is a U.S.-led joint venture between Space Voyager, but also Airbus and Mitsubishi. You also have the Chinese project, because they were actually excluded from the ISS project, so they created their very own international space station, and it's called the Tiangong. So we'll have to wait and see. Maybe we'll have two different international space stations.
Julia Seeger, thank you so much for that. And that's it for this edition. Do stay with us here on France 24.
Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. My guest has been a well-known figure at the European Parliament over the last 5 years, but she was only catapulted into the French national limelight earlier this year. Valérie Ayé was chosen by Emmanuel Macron to lead the EU election campaign here in France on behalf of the presidential majority. It was a tough campaign which culminated in a resounding victory for the far-right National Rally. On that election night in June, in a shock announcement, the French president called a snap parliamentary election in which none of the competing parties came close to winning a majority, and so the political drama in France continues. Valérie Ayé has been president of the centrist Renew group in the European Parliament since January of this year, and she's been re-elected to that position. Welcome to you to the programme.
Thank you.
So let's go straight to this crucial vote on July the 18th. Ursula von der Leyen, of course, running for a second term as European Commission President. You tweeted that your group's discussions with Ursula von der Leyen were frank. Sounds like it was quite a difficult exchange.
Not so difficult. It was a very constructive exchange. We had, regarding our group, of course, we welcomed the decision of the head of state and government to propose Ursula von der Leyen as candidate for being re-elected as a president of the Commission. But it's not a blanco check, if I can say. We requested two things to her. First, political priorities regarding competitiveness, rule of law, defense and security, climate issues, so on the content.
The Green Deal, obviously.
Exactly. And also, we want her and her political family to be absolutely clear on the fact not doing any deal with the far right in the European Parliament.
Do you feel you've got that guarantee about no deal with the ECR, the European Conservative Reformists? Did you get that from her or not?
She had a very clear answer: no deal with the ECR, no formalized deal with the ECR. She has discussions with some of them, but no deal, which is important indeed.
And of course, she only got through with 9 votes the first time round. You've said that, yes, no blank check, but that you also have a responsibility not to throw the EU into institutional chaos, right?
Indeed, that's right. We all have, pro-European politicians, we all have a responsibility for stability in this real troubling world. And that's why we are asking a lot also to Ursula von der Leyen. Concrete commitments so that we can manage to stabilize this pro-European majority. I'm confident about what she will present to us on Thursday, but indeed we will see, we'll have a debate and then we will vote.
That's right. How has the atmosphere changed, though? Because, of course, you did lose a significant number of seats in the European election in June, but you're now very close to the ECR. You're the fifth largest bloc now, so you dropped a few places, but you're actually quite close in the number of seats to the ECR. So, and you're hoping to get a couple more people in the next few days?
I will try to. I will do my best. Now we are at 77 members. Yeah. We gained 3 in the last days and weeks. So I will try to have more colleagues so that we can keep our third position, or fourth position. But of course, the figures are important for sure. And as president of the group, this very important group, I would have preferred, and I've fought myself to have more and more seats. But at the end, added to that, what is the most important is our political position, our influence. And at the end of the day, we will maintain our influence, because there isn't any possible majority without the Renew group.
But would it help to have more influence, for example, when it comes to committee chairmanships in the Parliament, if you were to go up above this current fifth-placed
Of course,
position?
All the positions are important. The committee chair, of course, the presidents of the different groups. Also, we never speak about the coordinator's position. It seems to be more technical, but at the end, you can have lots of positions and very, very powerful coordinators. So you have all the positions, and at the end, the political influence you can have also regarding the negotiations. And as I said, our political position, we are the bridge between the right and the EPP and the socialists in the European Parliament.
Yeah,
and no majority can be done without us. So it means that the right needs us and that the left needs us too.
Let's not skate over, though, some of the internal problems. You had this Czech party, the ANO, which left your group because they basically became a Eurosceptic party. And you've also got this problem with the Dutch VVD, which at the national level has entered into a four-way coalition with the far right in the Netherlands.
Yes, which is non-conform to our values and our principle in the European Parliament. And our position is clear: no deal with the far right. Absolutely no deal. We practice what we call the cordon sanitaire. So it means no deal, no discussions, no vote for any far right candidates.
But they won't be expelled, though. Ultimately, the VVD from your
I'm
group.
president of the group. I have a discussion with my head of delegation, because I cannot take a decision myself. So we had a frank discussions and we took decisions. So first, to have a mission at the national level to ask them to be accountable about what they did. Second, not to invite them anymore to our activities. And then I think you will see they don't have any more responsibility within the group.
You've called the newly formed Patriots for Europe a paper tiger. You say they won't have that much influence, but are you worried that if they combine with the ECR and even the EPP on certain issues, let's say farming or the internal combustion engine, then they could actually have some influence?
That's why I will ask my EPP colleagues not to make any deal with them, to apply the cordon sanitaire on the responsibilities, but also on the content. We can have a majority, and we have the majority with EPP, SND and Renew. We should continue with this pro-European majority. So that's absolutely clear. I'm confident about our common willingness to continue with this pro-European majority. We had frank discussions with EPP colleagues during the last days, and our final conclusion was quite clear about this common understanding and political willingness.
Valérie, you've been very outspoken about the Hungarian Prime Minister and what he calls his peace tour to Kiev, Moscow, Beijing and Washington. Now, Poland has asked for a discussion about the legality of that peace mission because, of course, he didn't represent the European Council. He didn't have a mandate. Do you support something like a kind of legal probe, or would you take a more low-key approach to this?
I count on the Council to take its responsibilities. What is happening now is absolutely unacceptable. Unacceptable. We already knew that this presidency would not have been like the others because we have rule of law issue in Hungary. We know the proximity between Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin. I request and I ask with my group, the head of state and government, the Council, to take its legal and political responsibility to ask him to stop what he's doing he's doing that in the name of Europe. No, that cannot be done in our name.
And of course, a lot of member states and government have deliberately snubbed Orban and sent much lower level officials to these council meetings in Budapest. Is that the right way forward, do you think, during this presidency? Or would you be in favor of actually trying to end the Hungarian presidency early?
I think we should find a political way for him not being in responsibility anymore. What he's doing here, it's happening now, it's unacceptable, and we should find a way, and the Council should find a way to end it. Otherwise,
to end it before the 6 months has officially finished.
I think so. And if it is not possible for any political or legal reason, so let's see how we can manage and challenge him. But really, we have a real political problem here.
Let's talk a bit about France as well. You call the French parliamentary election outcome here a victory for the Republic, but of course it leaves nobody satisfied in the end. Are you worried about this paralysis that could continue for some time here, potentially?
First, I would like to say that the French people understood the risk of having the far right in responsibility. And they said, look, we vote. Indeed, the far right had a lot of votes and voters. That's a reality.
They had 10 million votes, more than anybody
huge.
else.
And that's why we also need to think about how to be more concrete in the answer we give in our public policy for people. But the reality is that nobody won the election. No, there is no bloc having an absolute majority in the National Assembly. So it means that French politicians should look to what we do in the European Parliament, which is absolutely not a practice at the national level. We don't do coalition. It's not in our political culture. So considering the current situation, they should say, look, let's go. We all pro-European, Democrat, Republican politicians, let's speak together to try to find, for those 2 years or 3 years, to find a way to work together so that the country can continue to work.
Thank you so much, Valérie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being our guest. And what Valérie was saying there about a possible change in French political culture is exactly what we're going to be discussing in part 2 of this program with my panel of MEPs at the European Parliament in Brussels. So don't go away.
Camper pour me avec nous, nous doit avoir toute chance pour l'aller ou bien toute chance pour mourir soit nous tout bébé.
Yo batli, yo fait le rendre sang noir à la fin de mourir. Fini à quitter. Il tombe te mourir tout.
Mais il a vu m'a chercher. Dans les hauteurs. Faut avec tout comme derrière.
Les bandits comptent des armes que la police nationale ne détient pas.
Ce sont des oligarques qui nous ont donné. Pas pour le système de travail.
Les bonnes armées sont devenues puissantes parce qu'ils sont aidés et encouragés par des bras puissants.
Il n'y a qu'une option pour les bandits. Ils laissent déposer les armes ou aller en prison.
Quelle était force multinationale, quelle était n'importe force étrangère qui vient dans le pays. C'est un génocide de la vie. Nous exigeons, au nom de vivre ensemble, d'être à la table des négociations.
Haiti, the iron grip of the gangs. Watch Reporters Plus on France 24.
I'm Rochelle Harrison-Pless in Sydney. Whether it's an environmental story, business feature or breaking news, I report on the stories that matter from across Australia and New Zealand here on France 24.
Rochelle Harrison-Pless, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
WESN.
Here's your WESN News on the hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Missing taxi driver found dead. Kamala repeats call to remove Hines. Regionally, Barbados denies media reports of citizens' health put at risk during ICC World Cup. And internationally, federal judge dismisses Trump classified documents case. Now for the details. Udovic, age 40, of River Road, Vega de Oropouche, was found in a decomposing state, dressed only in underwear with his 2 feet and right hand bound. He was discovered at around 1 p.m. on Sunday, 3 days after his wife reported him missing. It was headed by ASP Sukdeo and comprised members of the Anti-Kidnapping Unit and Eastern Division Task Force. They were assisted by the GPS company, which provided information on his last known location. Udovic's wife identified the body on the scene. She reported him missing on July 13th and told police he was last seen around 10 a.m. on July 12th, when he left home for work. She said she last spoke to him later that day around 3 p.m. Homicide Region 3 is continuing investigations. Opposition leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar has renewed her call for National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines to be removed, as she noted the violence and murders are out of control under his tenure. She stated whether one politically supports or opposes the UNC, they must acknowledge that brutal violence and murders is out of control under Hines. Criminals don't care who are UNC or PNM. Everyone is targeted. Prasad Bisesa added that political rivalry in this country can be heated and passionate, but it must always be driven by a sincere love for the country and fellow citizens. She added, Rowley must act in the best interest of citizens and remove Hines now. I extend sincere condolences to the families of all victims who have been murdered over this violent weekend. My prayers are with you, she urged citizens to hold strong, as she assured that a UNC government will give the legal firearms and legislation to level the field and fight back against vicious criminals. Prasad Bisesa stressed it is time for our citizens to be given the means to protect themselves because the state cannot protect them. Regionally, government has denied media reports that the health of Bajans had been placed at risk during the recently concluded International Cricket Council Men's T20 World Cup. In addition to hosting the finals of the competition that was won by India, Barbados hosted several preliminary games in the tournament that was held in the West Indies and United States between June 1st to 29th. In a statement, the Ministry of Health and Wellness said it strongly refutes a statement made in a section of the press regarding the health of Bajans during the tournament, noting that during Cricket World Cup, in conjunction with the Trinidad-based Caribbean Public Health Agency, it instituted a real-time surveillance system to capture all possible public health events that could have occurred. The ministry encourages the public to use reputable sources and refrain from using unofficial and unverified sources to obtain their information, the statement added. And internationally, a federal judge has dismissed the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump. Judge Eileen Cannon ruled that Special Counsel Jack Smith, illegally appointed by the Justice Department, violating the Constitution's Appointments Clause. This ruling is a major legal victory for Trump, coming as he prepares to accept the Republican nomination. The case involved felony counts related to classified records at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Prosecutors argued Smith's appointment was legal, but Cannon disagreed, citing a lack of congressional approval. The dismissal can be appealed, and this decision could still be overturned by a higher court. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. My guest on this edition of the program is one of us, a presenter here at WESN. He's a psychologist, Soleil Joseph, and the discussion we're having in this edition of the program has to do with, you could say, the court's mercy on someone who was being held. He spent 10 years and 7 months in pre-trial custody for the killing of his own child. The story is that he was having an argument with the child's mother. They're people from Point Fortin, and that he, in the middle of that argument, he dropped the child on the child's head. And the mother found that, after a while looking at the child, months old, she found that the head was swollen and the child succumbed to that. Initially, both mother and father were prepared to tell the court that the child fell off a bed in which they were on and died. But in the time that the man spent in prison, and people were talking about it, relatives told the police that he had done this on three previous occasions, twice in the home and once in the bushes. And that seems to be the way of how well, this man, I was going to say other people, but probably this is what we want to get at. What would cause somebody to take that kind of action, especially against a little child? Drop the child on the head deliberately, and did that on more than one occasion. The baby died, and the mother was prepared to say that the child fell off the bed. We'll get to that part of it in a moment. But Mr. Joseph, thanks for coming on, trying to understand what does that tell you about, what do you know of the psychology of somebody like that, who that is how he responds to frustration and to deal with issues in his life, dropping a baby on his head.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Andy, to you and your viewers. I hope we can get into some of the crux of the matter. I want to say everything that we're going to discuss today is based on the limited scope of details and information that we have, that we are privy to. All right, so it's not that we can give us a very specific, exact diagnosis based on the limited information that we have available. All right, so so everything that was going to be said here, or conversation that I will have, attempt to answer the questions that you asked, will be an attempt to do so through the limited frame of the information that I have. I really just want to say that, because I don't want anybody saying that I've diagnosed this gentleman from a newspaper article or 2 news reports, right? I haven't seen him, and we haven't done the full gambit of assessment tools or utilize the assessment tools to be able to give an affirmative diagnosis.
Yeah. So before you go there, let me just ask then, it raises a question. Does somebody like this, is somebody like this required to get some help in sorting his mentality out and his behavior and his psychology out then?
By law? No. By law, no. By law, and of course, for frequent viewers of this station, they should know I'm a counseling psychologist by profession, right? And I've been doing this for a number of years, over 15 years. But technically, by law, I don't really exist. So there's not necessarily any mandatory, at least there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no mandatory assessments specifically required for persons by psychologists. Now, you do have some mandatory assessments by doctors that might be required. I think in public service and so on, if somebody is acting erratically and so on, under I think the various health ordinances, they can have somebody escorted or taken to St. Anne's based on those health ordinances. But to say, like an example like here, where you have somebody who clearly was showing a history of behavior, subnormal behaviors, there's no mandatory law to have them assessed.
Yeah, so the judge in this matter, Justice Shireen Bailey Murray, I think it was, so she didn't have a prerogative. There was no prerogative existing for her to order that this person get psychological treatment.
Well, I am no lawyer, and perhaps we may need to bring in our legal mind from the program, from on the station, to come and have a say on the matter. But
strictly legal. Yes, go
ahead. From what I understand about how it functions, the judge may have had to set a precedent, because there's, as far as I'm aware, there's no significant precedent that has been set, or no legal framework specifically for her to say, well, okay, 21 years or 20 years or 10 years with mandatory therapy.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a branch of your profession referred to as clinical psychology. You think then this is probably a job better suited for a clinical psychologist to look at it and determine what might be the case here and how to go about reaching somebody like that?
So let me briefly try to explain the difference here. Yeah. So there are clinical psychologists who work with me as well, yeah? And what the clinical psychologists do is that they focus a lot more on testing and assessment. Yeah, so they would do psychological testing and assessment and so on. So yes, they can be utilized for testing to see if these persons where they're functioning from, what kind of space, if they are mentally healthy, if they're mentally unwell, what preterm the diagnosis may be. And then, well, my job essentially is to take that diagnosis and then help them heal, help them get better, right? So it may be that in some of these cases, they may need to have a combination of persons recommended to work with these persons who are clearly significantly subnormal in terms of their functioning, to arrest and address what the issues are and try to rehabilitate them, if possible.
I note you stress that, if possible. But when I first approached you on the matter, you began to talk about the action itself from a perspective that suggested to me that this is a form of, I'm trying to find the correct term for it, but as a malaise in the behavior of somebody that will show itself up, as among how many ever other kinds of indicators that something is wrong with somebody. You said dropping a child on his head, and you began to talk about it a little bit. So clearly, you probably had some insight into that kind of behavior.
All right. To go forward, I'm going to go backwards.
Yeah.
So let me go backwards and say here that while the outcome of this situation has and rightfully so, would have a lot of people up in arms. If we track maybe some of the origins of the basic principles of the behavior, we may see that it is a lot more common, particularly in Trinidad, than we'd like to admit. So, for example, if we track the issue was that this gentleman, every time he got into whenever he got into an argument with his wife, his common law wife, and he got really upset, he would then go and take that out on the child. How many times we can say in the Caribbean that parents have been really angry at work, angry with a spouse, generally angry, and then they take that frustration out on the child. So this is not a one-off strange incident. It is extreme in its regard, and we can go into that, and I could have a conversation as to what would have prompted that or shaped that functioning and so on. But to a lesser extent, it's not something that is so far left out there. We do have a society, or we had a society at least, where traditionally a lot of people took out their frustrations on their children. Right? And so you would beat your children severely because you're upset and you're angry. And it may not be that you're angry with the child alone. It might be that you're angry with the entire situation. You're angry with life. You're angry with your partner. You're angry with whoever. But, the child is going to get cursed out. The child is going to get lashed or hit or beaten badly. You are then venting your frustrations out on the child. You're using your child as a tool to release your stress and frustration. Right, and that's, by the way, is almost core definition of abuse, right? And so that is something that we often have a lot of, or we had a lot of in Trinidad. Because it sounds familiar. I'm certain people listening can say, I experienced that, or I know somebody who went through that.
But this specific kind of action, and it's not even punishing, but you explain a little bit sometimes. So someone will take out their frustrations wherever the frustration came from on their children. But this particular kind of action, dropping the child on its head on 3 separate occasions, at least 3 occasions, which came to the attention of the court in this matter. That particular form of dealing with your frustration. What do you say about that?
All right. So that is that's an underestimation. It's not a bit. That's a lot more, a lot further out there than the average person who is taking out the frustration of the child through what we call licks or physically hitting the child. Now, when you get to the point of dropping the child on the head, that falls more within the realm of sadistic behavior. And sadistic behavior really speaks to people who experience a release, a joy, or a pleasure, whether it be just regular pleasure or even sexual pleasure or whatever, but pleasure from hurting others or seeing others hurt. And so this one steps a little bit away from just venting your frustration onto a child, and actually using a child's pain for you to feel better, that ups the ante significantly from just regular abuse to something we call sadistic abuse. And so it makes me wonder what else was done to the child. It was the first time, wasn't the second. It might suggest to me that that perhaps this father was utilizing this child's pain as a means or a mechanism for him to have a release and for him to feel better about himself. And that is a significant notch up of the abuse we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and you're doing that to get at the mother.
Yes. So well, I can't say that specifically was the cause, or to hurt the mom, or I don't know. I don't know what his motivations are or were. I didn't read that, and I haven't spoken to him. But that can be one of the significant motivators. It can be that he felt that that's the best way to hurt the mom, by hurting the child. But again, that is sadistic. So you're trying to hurt someone else by hurting someone who can't defend themselves. And so then you're talking, that's sadistic behavior. So you're getting pleasure, manipulating your spouse, right? Hurting them through hurting the children or hurting the child. And dropping a child on his head is one of, when you speak about abuse, I don't want to rank and rate abuse to feel as though they have one that's worse than the other and so on or whatever. But there's a high significant risk of internal trauma and damage, even death, when you're talking about dropping a baby on its head. That is significant. That is significant because it says to you there that this person has, maybe they have, but they've reduced the significance of the potential damage, of death, of the risk of that or whatever, versus how bothered the other party may be by the action, how upset that it gets, how much it's like saying, if for those persons familiar with Uno, this is your ultimate card, this is your draw four. So your ultimate solution to addressing any issue, argument, thing that you can't treat with, is to significantly physically put your child in harm's way, and not just harm's way, but within the remit of death. And if you think about that, which rational, and I use the word normal here, normative functioning person, psychologically, would do that? Who would put their child, it's not somebody else's child, it's yours. Who would put their child's life at risk like that just to punish the other person, the other parent, or to feel better about themselves?
Right. So
that's very subnormal functioning.
And let's talk about the other person that is now the other parent, the mother. She was, according to the reporting in the newspaper, she was prepared to go and say that the child fell off the bed because the child was on the bed with the two of them. And it is, well, let's deal with that first. I mean, something is amiss with her as well.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because in my humble opinion, more than just the father, a lot of people should have been charged in that situation. Everybody who was aware that this child was being dropped on his head and made no report or did nothing to rectify that situation should have been charged. Because this was an easily avoidable situation. This is a situation where the system failed the child and system failed the parents as well. Because everybody should have reported that. That's the law. Once you are aware of a child being abused, it's a criminal offense not to report that information. So for everybody who was aware that the child was being dropped on the head, the family members, relatives, neighbors, and so on, should have been charged. If not fined, some people should have been facing jail time as well, perhaps even the mother. And to those persons who say that it may be wicked because the mom perhaps was going through her own abuse and so on, yes, most likely she was. It sounds like a very abusive, like it was an abusive functioning type relationship. Perhaps I'm assuming here, because there's not much evidence for me to say otherwise, but from general history of persons functioning within the same sphere, is perhaps what we may call a codependent, negative codependent relationship. Yeah, so that when one person is upset, the other person has to be upset too. So what you find generally in those types of negative codependent relationships is that one person tries to outdo the hurt of the other person. So if you have hurt me, then I am going to hurt you more because I am hurting because you are hurting, kind of, and it's back and forth kind of functioning. And there's no mature person to say, listen, I recognize that you are hurting and I'm going to step out, or perhaps let's address your hurt. No, both persons hurting and they keep hurting each other.
Yeah.
And there's an extreme case, seems to be an extreme case here, where perhaps the mom also was trapped in this abusive arrangement and relationship, and it just continued.
Yeah, and it is relatives who had to go and tell the authorities that no, that is not what happened. The man did it, threw the child off the bed on the head, and he'd done it twice before, once at home and once in the bushes somewhere. You describe the mother's response and reaction to this as negative codependence. So what is positive codependence, if I may ask?
Codependence in itself was not to be